Recently, I heard someone say something that startled me a little bit. They described what they believe the radical claim of Christian faith. And they said it's not necessarily that radical claim. It's not necessarily that we say Jesus was God. But more importantly, our radical claim is that we say God was Jesus. Now, I was somewhat startled by that statement and that it focuses less on what you typically think of as religious questions, on the questions in Christian faith of Jesus' divinity, primarily the stuff of religious orthodoxy and of our creeds. But there is a profound assertion here that Jesus, this Palestinian rabbi Jew, human in the backwaters of the empire, expresses something fundamental about the nature of God. It says something, our claim, that this man was the full incarnation and expression of who God was and is. So it says something about the human-divine connection, but also challenges how we understand how God works in the world, even what it means to call ourselves humans. And the point is, and I know no other way to say this than in Jesus, God gets down and dirty with the human experience. So the scandal of Jesus is that God does not choose to be above, all of it residing in heaven like a distant old man. Let's confess that's often how we envision it, judging the foibles and failures of the human race. That is not who God is in Jesus. Nor does God stand out there somewhere outside reality, adjudicating our own personal sins, our own personal righteousness. Are we good enough or no? No, what is expressed, the scandal of Jesus, is that God comes down in Jesus' own humanity to express the nature of God's power, God's grace, God's love, especially, very importantly, not outside, but in the very temptations and allures, and the powers of the world. If you really think about that, that's pretty profound. That God comes down. As one biblical commentator put it when addressing the story we read this morning, the temptations of Jesus in the wilderness, they write, "The promise of the gospel is that the one who is with you always, even to the end of the age, has already gone ahead of you, ahead of all his followers, even to the most forsaken places of the wilderness." The scandal, the promise of the gospel, is God meets us in the most difficult tests of our own lives. No place, they write, is so desolate, no place so distant, no place so challenging that Jesus has not already been there. No test, no temptation we might experience is so great that Jesus has not already overcome it. I don't know if y'all remember from your old days, we don't teach it as much, the Apostles' Creed. And there's a line in there, in the Apostles' Creed, you may not know this, that said, Jesus descended into hell after he had been crucified and killed. And the point of that line, Jesus descended into hell, is not to say God was punishing Jesus. It was God was willing to go to hell after he died to save. And if we say God was incarnated in Jesus, then that is a truth about the nature of God as well. And I think that's a very important point for us today, especially these days as we find ourselves in our own, one might call it, American wilderness, right? Facing our own temptations. Struggling, let's confess, I don't know if anybody's yet figured out how to respond, how to be faithful in this time. Jesus' encounter with the tempter represents in many ways his encounter with the cultural powers and pressures of his own day. How does one respond to the very real physical and spiritual needs of ourselves and those around us? What does it look like to trust God in this context? That's an important question for us today. What are the appropriate uses of authority and power that serve the world by serving God? For the followers of Jesus then and now, these are important questions. How to live out our faithfulness in the realities of daily life, empowered by the one who is Emmanuel, God with us. And in this story, Jesus names those powers, those temptations that were his temptations, but also are true of all temptations for us human beings. That odd temptation, the first one always puzzled me. It made sense to me. He turns stones into bread after 40 days of going hungry. And I think, well, that makes sense. God has that power. He has that power. Turn the stones. There's so many stones anywhere. You turn the stones into bread, you don't have to go hungry, and neither does anyone else. Use your power to turn the stones into bread. And it seems like a very, it makes sense to me, God's miraculous power for a seemingly legitimate physical need, both for ourselves and for those we know, the hungry in the world. Why won't he do it? What's wrong with that temptation? All Jesus has to do, all God has to do is wave a hand, hunger ends, right? And God could do it in a spectacular fashion. And I don't know about you, but sometimes when I look at the hunger in the world, and I wonder why God hasn't waved the hand and fixed it. And why is that a wrong thing, if it is, for Jesus to do? And Jesus chooses not to do it. And why? And I think in part because God expressed, God incarnated in the humanity of Jesus, knows that our hunger is more than physical. To be human is to be hungry, but also to be human physically, but also to be hungry spiritually. To always be yearning. That God's desire is for more than gratification of our physical hunger. It's more the deeper hunger that drives our humanness. And God doesn't work, according to Jesus, the way we expect. It's kind of like, again, I'm going to show my age. There's the old song. Does anybody remember the old song, "Oh Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz?" Some of you know it. As if the purpose of God is to meet our physical needs. The temptation is to see God or understand God, and many of us do, as a powerful magician dispensing health and wealth, right? There are some health and wealth, as if that's what God's job is to do. And Jesus says no. Instead, as odd as this sounds, God in Jesus chooses to experience our hunger, our human deprivation, and in that identification with our humanity, with our human condition, shows us a way not of power over, but of something far more profound about how God works. God works in solidarity with humanity. God knows our hungers, our physical, spiritual needs, and God knows those are met when humans are bound together in God's spirit and will for love of neighbor. Hunger will end, not by some magic wand, when we have solidarity, when we human beings learn and have solidarity with all our neighbors, no matter the color of their skin, no matter what they no matter who they are, that is when hunger will end. And our yearning spiritually will be complete. The second temptation, this invitation to climb up on the pinnacle of the temple, Jerusalem, everybody can see, throw himself down from the temple so God can save him rather publicly. It's a little similar to the first temptation. Dramatic proof of divine protection and spectacle of being saved. Jesus, if you get the right spectacle that seems to appeal to human beings these days, you would gain followers. This is a temptation to prove we are special because God saves us in dramatic fashion. But that's not who God is in Jesus Christ. Instead, God in Jesus refuses to prove his identity through flashy signs. His messiahship was not based on public spectacle or on any form of coercion. Jesus expresses divinity in a power rooted in sacrifice, in servanthood, on a willingness to not have power as the world expects God to be. And what does that mean, to live in a world in which, where we think God waved the magic wand, God save us, we believe instead that we can trust God even when we hunger and are afraid? I think it'd be easier if God just saved us, right? I'd feel a lot better. But the point of Jesus is the power. What saves us is this message: God is with us. And the final temptation, I think that's the most straightforward one, and particularly in the context in which we live now. It's more straightforward than the other two, the temptation to political power. Put me in charge, right? I'll fix it. Make me king. Give me control over all the kingdoms of the earth. If only Jesus had instituted a Christian nation, right? If only we were in power, everything would be good. Jesus rejects the idea of ruling that way. True kingship comes through not taking charge, not dominating, but by God's solidarity, God sharing our human condition and showing us a different way. It's not a way of power, of kingship, of ruling from Rome or Jerusalem or wherever, but a way of humility, a way of compassion, a way of kindness. True power. God's kingdom is made manifest not when we are in charge, never when we are in charge, but when we serve. So some of you probably have heard this story before. I love this story. There's a man walking along a road and he trips and falls into this deep, deep hole and finds himself at the bottom of this great pit, and the walls are too steep and he cannot climb his way out of there, and he struggles to get out, and he's getting desperate, and then he sees someone walking along the road as he sees them from the depth of the hole, and it's a politician, and he says, "Come, save me. Can you save me?" And the politician simply says, "Well, you need to get out of there. You need to lift yourself up. You need to save yourself." And then walks on. Then the man, still deep in the pit, sees another person walking by, and he could see it's a pastor. And he cries out to the pastor, and he says to the pastor, he says, "You need to help me. I'm stuck here in the pit. I need to get out. I need to be saved." And the pastor writes out on a piece of paper a prayer and throws it down into the pit. That'll save you. Then this man sees a neighbor, a friend, walk by and cries out. He says, "John, help me, save me." And to his surprise, John jumps down into the pit. And the man says, "John, are you crazy? Why would you jump in here with me? It's so deep, we can't get out. Now we're both stuck down here in this pit." And John says, "Yes, but I've been down in this pit, and I know the way out." To God be the glory this day and forevermore. Amen.